Well, welcome to Psychology to Live By. Today's a Q&A with some delightful people. Our topic is to be interested. And our participants have watched the podcast of that name, which you can see or listen to at my website, drchris.life. But I'll do a quick summary now before we go into our Q&A. So, universally, we have the need for social esteem. We need and desire to be valued by others. This esteem is really valuable and we trade on it in many ways. But a problem arises when we try to be interesting. It's actually very unappealing. It also creates insecurity and anxiety as we engage more and more in impression management, the deliberate attempt to create a positive impression of us in others. This need to be interesting has Stone Age origins. Esteem in the village was critical to our survival. It was an existential issue and therefore was selected for in evolution. As it turns out, the wise strategy is actually to be interested in others and to treat them with kindness and attention. The benefits for the recipient are considerable. Lower blood pressure and heart rate, calming our fight-flight system, less vascular constriction and inflammation, and feelings of warmth and connection towards others. And the very same raft of benefits is produced for the person who's being kind. This is especially so when we provide others with what I call the three experiences. The experience of being heard, understood, and accepted. And to achieve this, we can practice interpersonal mindfulness, remembering to listen deeply and to be genuinely interested. In fact, to hunt for what we find genuinely interesting in them. Finally, there is another benefit of being interested generally. People who have deep interests end up being objectively more interesting. And it's an unintended side benefit. Ironically, it's via absorption in our interests that we forget self and thereby enhance our value in the eyes of others. Dale Carnegie put it best. And he said, if you want to be interesting, remember one thing, be interested. Righto, so now to our Q&A. And here are the promised delightful people. So welcome, guys. You've watched the video of Be Interested. And as usual, I'm very interested in your insights and questions. So who would like to kick off there?
I can start.
Fantastic, Colin.
I'm always hesitant to blame everything on social media, but I think why not blame everything on social media? I feel like it's contributed, and I think that people in general have a really difficult time communicating and especially listening. And just being not thinking about the next thing that they're doing or the next, not multitasking or doing 100 different things or just being present, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, there's so many stepping off points there, Colleen. But I think the thing about when we consider social media, I don't think we think about it in terms of our impact on others. I think we're largely thinking about what's in it for me, and also the thing about social media is, if it would be the most perfect example of impression management. In other words, people are constantly using it to present a positive impression of self. And one of the problems that leads to is in normal life, if someone is deliberately trying to impress and we're with them in person, we can normally pick up that, as we would say in Australia, they're a bullshit artist, right? You can pick up they're being inauthentic or, and it's a turn off. The trouble with social media, as you no doubt know, is that people can carefully curate their appearance, changing their physical appearance, airbrushing, putting things in there that are really gilding the lily. So our normal ability to be able to discern when a person's actually exaggerating, etc., is severely undercut. And that creates that terrible insecurity for people because we're now comparing ourselves to impossible standards. So it creates terrible insecurity, especially when people know that the image they're putting up there is also exaggerated. So, as I said, lots of stepping off points, but it certainly doesn't lead to happiness for most people. Yeah, that's a great point. What else, guys?
So sometimes I find it very hard to be curious about somebody. Although I have to say, I am curious about your comment, gilding the lily. Is that an
Yes.
an Aussie?
Oh, I think it is.
So I'd never heard of that term, but I knew exactly what it meant.
Yeah.
So
yes.
How do you get curious about someone that you're not really interested in being curious about?
Well, that's a real.
Yeah,
there are. I mean, it's a bit like. Well, a couple of things first. Because of personality, generally, we're naturally drawn to some people and not others. So we're going to have a built-in bias system. And essentially, we like people who aren't too different from us. Right? Now, that's not always the case, but there'll usually be some important alignments, So, but the first thing is to say is we're not designed to as easily resonate with all different, with certain personality types. And then there also might be our own personality. Some people, people who are more highly agreeable, and generally probably a little bit more sensitive, they're going to generally have more interest in others, right? Because they weigh as more important social relations, right?
So I guess you're basically telling me that I need to be more empathetic, and I'll be more curious because of it.
Well, you can't change your personality, Terry, as much as you might want to. Not that we would want you to, but being aware, regardless of who we are and who they are, being aware that that I'm not interested can be a reminder. That it might be as much a comment about ourselves as about the other person. And then it's a bit like mindfulness generally. A lot of people practice meditation, for example, great thing. But often they get off the meditation cushion and they forget about mindfulness for the rest of the day. And really, in my view, the point is of practicing mindfulness is to make us more mindful during the day. And I think that when we're with other people, I'd call this interpersonal mindfulness. It's a real opportunity to deepen our own mindfulness practice, especially with people we're not naturally drawn to. And the curious thing is, if you're really got a clear, conscious intentionality to find something interesting in a person, you'll find it. Right? One has to admit, though, Terry, that in my experience, that hunt is harder with some people rather than others.
Well, that's why it's a practice.
It is a practice, but it pays off for both parties. Yeah. And you probably have all noticed that there are some people who just seem to go around the world and people are attracted to them, and they tend to have more convivial relationships with people, even tricky people. And that's not coincidental. I think they take this attitude towards people, and that attitude elicits from other people the better angels of their nature. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Chris, the the thing that really with this one resonated with me were I apologize, I can't remember what you called it, the three, being heard, understood, and accepted.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about building that psychological safety, and that's really kind of where it's all the stem of feeling that psychological safety, right? So we are about to jump into training for new managers with our team. And this just, I think in order to get the best out of people and be creative, you really need to foster that type of environment. So kind of going along with what Terry was saying as well, like, can we teach somebody to be interested and not interesting?
Yeah, I think, yeah, brilliant. Yes, I think the short answer is yes, but that now we'll have the long answer. Terry, what was that look for? It's not easy, and it is linked to what Terry was saying, because we have our favourites, and we will create psychological safety for people we like. But for people we don't naturally like, we may be very disinclined to do that. And as well as that, some people are just more naturally interested than others, as I was saying, right? So you're going to, when you roll out this training, you're going to have some people think it's a great idea and it's wonderful and they're really into it. And they're already going to be the people that create psychological safety for people. So I think what you have to do is you have to make it very clear what the benefits are. And as I said in the podcast, the benefits are to both parties. So when we practice metta, which is the Buddhist term for loving kindness, but if we just think about it as this sort of very generous listening, when we operate in this way with people, it's really good for us, right? It changes our physiology and our psychology, but it also opens up the possibilities, as Terry was saying, for creativity in both parties. Now, why is that? That's because a huge part of our brain system, our biology and neurology, is designed around self-protection. So if you're feeling under threat, i.e. you're in a psychologically unsafe environment, your brain's going to move into fight-flight mode. It's not going to go into a creative mode. It's going to hijack all the resources, sometimes called the amygdala hijack. And you're going to, you're not going to be thinking creatively. You're going to go down the most used pathways. You're certainly going to be thinking mostly about protecting self. So again, managers understanding that it's not just about who you like. It's also about opening up the field of, creativity and productivity and quality, that people will just think better. And I guess the third thing is that, that expression, you don't really want a team of champions, you want a champion team. That psychological safety creates that synergy that, it's greater than the sum of the parts. And when people cooperate it's a bit like trade. When trade is good, it's a non-zero sum game. If I win, you also win. If I've got lots of oranges, each individual orange for me is not that valuable. And you've got lots of bananas, and you couldn't care if you lost one or two bananas. You've got so many. But I've got no bananas, you've got no oranges. So when we trade, one orange means a lot more to you than a banana. And in human relations, that's also true, right? So we're looking for these non-zero sum games where we get these win-wins, all right? So that was definitely the long answer.
That's great. Thank you so much.
And Chris, I can see you champing at the bit.
Well, what's interesting here is I kind of pinged like Terry did on the notion of creativity or curiosity underpinning a large portion of this. And
Yeah.
Generally, the people who have a high level of curiosity, is it fair to say that they generally also will tend to have a growth mindset just by nature? And because that curiosity is just about learning more about the world and being able to kind of challenge their own assumptions and all of that stuff. And then, so in that context, is it also fair to say that, those people are less concerned with how they are presenting themselves and are more concerned about what they might be able to learn out of the person that they are interacting with? And so by nature are removing their sense of self from that interaction. Is that it? Like, does that chain, those links all connect?
Yeah, I think sometimes. So I don't know whether it's a general rule. I'll tell you why. I think we need to distinguish a couple of things. That natural curiosity you're talking about, it is a feature of people on average who are a bit more creative. And it correlates very strongly with one personality dimension, which is openness to experience. So if people are going to be open to experience naturally, they'll apply that to everything, including people. All right. But the issue of growth mindset is it doesn't map on in exactly the same way. And it's a great thing if it does. If you have that natural curiosity and you have a growth mindset, i.e., you're very, very focused on the process and the world rather than self, because you don't see what you're doing as a reflection of a sort of limit on your actual capability. You're not paying attention to that. You're actually paying attention with intrinsic motivation and passion about what you're doing. That's liberating because it takes our attention off self. So, but I think there's many reasons people might have a growth or a fixed mindset.
Right.
For example, if you've had a history of being put down, of being, maybe a difficult childhood, where you're criticised with what Professor Carol Dweck from Stanford calls trait feedback, i.e. you're stupid, or you're lazy. So these traits, the person starts to develop an internal view that's fixed. Whereas if the feedback is much more around how you did something, you made a mistake here and I wonder what you would do next time, because if you did this, the effect would be that, or this was wonderful because it did that. It draws the person's attention outside self, and they start to think about learning as learning about tasks, not about improving me as a person, right? And or potentially a threat because it's going to reveal the limit of my capability. So it's complex, I think, is the answer. But what's common there is, when we're curious about the world, when we have a growth mindset, is that our attention is not on self. And I'm just actually developing a series of podcasts. I think I'll call it the Selfless Series, and it's about the benefits of dropping this self-consciousness, self-awareness in favour of a more complete engagement in the world. Yeah. All right, guys. Time has flown once again. As usual, they're really interesting and diverse insights. So I think from this podcast and this topic, there's some very simple takeaways. And it's really a reminder to pay attention in a particular way to people, and that is you're looking for what is genuinely interesting about them. I'll just say one more thing about this is that to the extent that we're self-interested, we find that very, very difficult to do. And normally, when we're not really interested in a person, yes, there might be some definite things about that person that are tricky or difficult, or maybe we might find boring, for example. But generally, it's a failure in our imagination, and we're focusing too much on what's in it for me. And if we can shift in our orientation, it can be amazing what you can help bring forth out of a person. Anyway, that's probably leading to another topic for another day. All right, guys, I'll see you next time. As always, thank you so much, and I wish you well. Bye.